What made you quit a job on the spot? Nothing dramatic. After working my bum off during the lockdown and promised an additional bonus, I received a quote-unquote low performance review conveniently timed a day before my bonus was to be paid. The low performance feedback canceled my bonus. Given all the other BS I was putting up with, I broke and quit. I had a nice month off and my new job pays significantly more. Never work for people that don't appreciate you. There are always others that will. Yep, a great example of respecting yourself. Props to OP. Story 2. I used to cut grass in a cemetery. I used a push lawnmower and had to lift it up onto the elevated graves and then back down and onto the next one, over and over and over. Minimum wage was like $4.25 an hour. After an hour cutting grass in the August heat, I sit down for my break and this guy named Leroy asks, "Was that worth $4.25 to you?" I quit the next day. Thanks, Leroy. Story 3. I asked for a raise and was told, okay. Next morning, Friday, I was told the same person who agreed with the raise that I should put a few more years in and then we'll talk again. I locked my toolbox at the end of the day and called the tow truck to pick it up. The shop manager was shocked that next Monday to find an empty spot where my tools were and couldn't understand why I left. Story 4. My grandfather, who I considered like a father, passed away after a long stay in a hospital. We were closer than he was with his own kids and our bond was quite special. I spoke to my manager about getting the day off of his funeral, since I was organizing part of the arrangements, and having a day or two of bereavement leave, and he agreed. The day of the funeral finally comes, and the staff start calling me, leaving me messages asking why I'm not at my shift, and telling me while I'm in a suit hosting family members at the funeral home that I have to find someone to replace me or face repercussions. Needless to say, I told them to figure it out and never look back. Story 5. I walked into the interview, everything went well, and I accepted the job offer. However, when I went to the front desk to do the paperwork, I noticed that the contract had a different pay amount. It also stated that I would be interning for the first month for just $100 a week. I immediately asked about the pay difference. I was told, "Oh, this is the standard contract. It hasn't been updated for your specific offer." I informed them that they need to edit it and initial the changes before I would sign. Their response, "Oh, that's not how things work here." I thanked them for their time and left without signing anything. They called me back on the day I was supposed to have started, asking where I was. I simply told them that because I didn't sign the contract, I was never an employee. Oh boy, that was a phone call. Story 6. I worked for a privately owned bakery for exactly 1 week. The owner's son came in, walked past the counter, and went into the bathroom. He came out a few minutes later without acknowledging me or my coworker, got into his car, and drove away. We both looked at each other, then opened the bathroom door, only to find this guy had literally messed all over the toilet seat and the toilet paper holder. I called the owner, told her what happened, and she said, "Deal with it." So I asked my coworker if she wanted to clean it up because I certainly wasn't going to. She declined and I told her I was walking out. She did too. We locked up the store and told the owner we quit but would reconsider staying if her son came back to clean up his own mess. She yelled and screamed at us for about 20 seconds before I said goodbye and hung up. Story 7. Not me, but a middle-aged tradesman where I work. I work underground and it isn't for everybody. Terrible environment and whatnot. This particular individual started working and after a few weeks decided that it wasn't for him. Bad conditions and hostile supervisor. He approached the boss at the morning meeting and told him that he wasn't going underground and that he was going to quit. The boss told him that he had to give him 2 weeks notice and without missing a beat, the guy replied, "For the next 2 weeks, you're going to notice that I'm not here." Turned around, packed his crap, and left. Was never heard from again. Story 8. I worked for a T-Mobile store, authorized reseller, not an actual dealer. 1 week I had an amazing week, sold 55 phones, brand new activations on a business account with 55 high-end phones at the time. When I got my next check, they said my paperwork was not in order and thus they couldn't pay me. As a side note, they always told us to make copies of all paperwork in case this happened so you can show it to the manager and get it resolved within a day. I went over my backup paperwork with the boss. He said everything looked to be in order and he would have the office cut me a check. I went to the office and they told me it was still not in order. I immediately gave them my store key and quit on the spot. I did go through collections and they did settle before I took them to court. The company did go out of business after a few years because they tried that with many other employees and eventually led to an investigation by the government, according to an old coworker I bumped into years later. Story 9. Working as a cashier in a local shop, one night 2 guys came at me with knives trying to get in the till. I just walked away and said have at it as it wasn't worth the minimum wage to get into it with a couple of guys waving knives at me. After they ran out of the store, I picked up my mobile phone and called the police, then called the store manager. The next day, the district manager meets me as I turn up for my shift the very next day. Her first words were, "It was very unprofessional of me to be on my phone while in work." I laughed at her and told her she could take this as my notice and walked out. I never had a problem with being held up, but the sheer gall of that got to me. Story 10. I worked at McDonald's when I was 16. We used to get a free McDouble or hot and spicy with small fries and drink for our lunch break. One day, when I went on break, the franchise owner was there, and when he noticed I asked for cheese on the hot and spicy, he attempted to make me pay for the whole meal because cheese wasn't free. I thought he was joking, so I laughed and started walking towards the break room until he yelled at me not to walk away from him in front of customers and my coworkers. I couldn't believe it. This grown, successful businessman was hounding me for a slice of cheese. Told them I wasn't going to pay, put the food down, and walked out. They tried calling me to come to work that weekend. I told them, no thanks, and never went back. Story 11. Lol, I had an inside hint from HR that there was about to be mass layoffs and my name was on the list. I scheduled my week-long vacation and returned the day before layoffs were presumed to have happened. My boss reamed me out for daring to take a vacation. She said I would never advance in the company if I chose such a formative time in a project to take a vacation. She told me I would never be an executive producer if I went on a vacation before project launch, even though I wouldn't be able to touch it for the week I was away anyways, and that I would always be known in the television industry as quote-unquote lazy. I chilled, took my vacation, and returned. She was mad and said that she was upset with me for having left and made her take care of my project for me. Chewed me out in front of the entire company in the conference room. I chilled and was like, aren't you laying off a bunch of us tomorrow? I'm just waiting for you to fire me so I can collect unemployment. The entire room literally starts panicking and management tries to understand how the hell I knew about layoffs. It was my one true Regina George causing chaos moment in my life. Story 12. I'm a physician assistant and took a job at an urgent care. After working there for about a month, I noticed some irregularities, such as some medications being expired and sometimes a lack of supplies. I wrote that off as the office manager not being as astute as she should have been and brought it up to the doctor who owned the place. He said he would talk to her and straighten it out. Then one of the medical assistants came to me and said, this has been going on forever, right? She then said that things would never change and to get used to it because the expired medications had been on the shelf for months and they were told to never throw them out. She then also told me that the autoclave, the machine that sterilizes instruments, was broken, and all they did was pretty much wash the instruments in soap and water and then put them in the autoclave anyway to get them as clean as possible. That was the end of that. I made out a formal complaint to the state medical board and never showed up again. The state actually came in the very next day and raided the place. They shut him down immediately. They found so many things wrong that not only did they keep the place out of business, they suspended his license. He was also prosecuted on federal charges because he was running a scam for truck driver physical exams. Story 13. I worked for a restaurant/pub. The owner would come in with his buddies for hours at a time, a lot of times forcing the bartender to stay way past closing serving them. Obviously, I was told not to charge anything because it's the owner's party. After hours of drinks on the house, no tip, not even from the owner. This started to happen frequently. Usually we'd put up with it if they'd leave or be done before close. Then we started hearing that the kitchen staff hadn't been paid in a month. Bartenders were being paid because we made like $4 an hour, but the kitchen wasn't a tipped kitchen and made a decent wage. Turns out the owner was a total alcoholic idiot, which should have been obvious, and buried himself in debt. A week later, we were told our checks weren't there on the day they were supposed to be, and 2 days later, there was still no checks. I told them if my check wasn't there tomorrow, I won't come in for my shift. They said it came, I got there, and they said, well, what I meant was it's actually on the way. I talked to and of course, I walked out. I later found out no checks were ever issued there again. They tried to pay some people cash, but it fell apart very soon after. Story 14. I worked at Walmart for a short time. I worked as hard as I possibly could to unload their pallets of merchandise. I always thought I was so damn fast. I studied the process and I believed I perfected it every single day. My manager came up to me and told me I needed to be faster. So I did, and the fast pace made me lose a little focus, causing me to break a finger. I let management know that I might be a little slower due to my injury, and they straight up told me we won't tolerate any laziness, and wrote me up when I didn't meet their ridiculous standards. So I went home after my shift and never returned. Never called, never formally quit, I just never came back. Screw Walmart. Story 15. I was at a company for about a year and a half as an assistant project manager. In that year and a half, I had 3 different bosses, the newest one being a heavy micromanager. I was getting paid about 20% below the standard salary for the position, overworked without any additional compensation, and the overall culture of the company was just flawed. My boss started nitpicking my work at the end of the day. I told her I had plenty of time to get it done before the end of the day, but she kept pushing and escalating. She was borderline screaming, and I just cut her off and said, I'm not doing this crap anymore, I quit. She yelled back, well, I need it in writing. And I said back with the straightest face, I don't have to do crap in writing. I quietly packed all my stuff up, said good luck to my coworkers, and I left. A year later, after working a couple of other jobs, I accepted a project manager position with a competing company and made almost twice as much as I was making at the previous. And I get to post on Reddit while at work without getting yelled at. Story 16. Fun times, working at a grocery store when I was a teenager. I was still out on my own, but working anything I could to make ends meet. I guess I didn't work hard enough being a one-man crew in front of a store manager who decided to tell me to go faster, impossible, and do even better for my $4.25 an hour. I tried explaining I was going as fast as personally possible when he decided to say, "You'll do what you are told as fast as you're told if you want to keep this job. You should be so lucky." I decided right then and there, bro, I'd rather starve than work for some stupid person whose high point in life is the assistant manager at a buy-low grocery store. I quit on the spot. Story 17. I worked at a restaurant as a server. We just catered a large wedding reception. The owner's wife was chatting with the wedding party all night and occasionally getting drinks. At the end of the night, she said she's taking her share of the tips since she helped so much. I say fine, even though that's illegal in our state. An hour and a half after the party ends, the restaurant is still a mess, and the owner's wife is just standing around talking while I was supposed to clean up. It was almost midnight, and I'd worked my other job earlier that day. I walked out without saying a word. They ended up giving me all of my tips on my last paycheck. Story 18. The boss wanted my team to work extra shifts without weekends to finish a project's next milestone, so we can show the client that we are capable of finishing before the due date. We worked 14 hours daily for 4 weeks with no weekends. In the last 2 days, we worked for 36 hours straight with no breaks since the due date was a day to one way. Everyone was screwed and on the edge, no smiles, no small talk, nothing, and we don't get paid overtime. After finishing the milestone, he thanked us and called us for a meeting saying we have to continue working like this for an unknown period until they hire new staff members. I refused with another colleague and said we will work for what we get paid for, which is 9 hours per day, 5 days a week. He didn't take us seriously, but we didn't give a crap at that moment. We worked the next 2 weeks accordingly. He called us and said that he was extremely disappointed and that we didn't value the company. I walked out, collected my stuff, faced my resignation letter to the HR, and said bye-bye. Story 19. Going to the toilet pre-meeting to negotiate a raise, I heard both directors of the company, small firm, everything ran through them, talking outside the window that they were going to flat out refuse any offers and, quote, make the schmucks work overtime to prove his loyalty and, quote, he has no prospects anyway, where will he go? Entered the meeting with my signed and printed resignation in hand, slapped it on the table after sitting down, and stood straight back up saying, meeting over. I now work for a successful company, part of a brilliant team of 10 people, an amazing pension, terrific bonuses, and obtainable progression with a great work-life balance. Half day every single Friday till I pass away also. If you're being mistreated at a job, overworked, underpaid, whatever it may be, get your affairs in order and walk. Story 20. I was working at one of those stands that sells flash frozen ice cream droplets. You know the ones. It was at an amusement park. At one point, it's a hot summer day, and I'm standing in the sun in front of my 40-degree freezer, simultaneously burning and freezing at the same time. I had a long line of customers because I was near the exit to a stunt show featuring a particular superhero that is a Knight of the Darkness. I scooped some ice cream balls into the plastic tray, slide my scoop over the top to knock off the excess ice cream quickly, and then hand it to the customer in exchange for their money. A wild manager appears. Suddenly, a manager tells me I didn't level off the ice cream correctly. He takes the scoop and small bowl from my hands and levels it off just like I had done for the precious customer. He then dumps it out back into the freezer and makes me do it again while standing over my shoulder. Mind you, I still have a long line of customers. So I do it again, and this time he is also not pleased and screams at me and makes me dump it out and do it again. So I do literally the same thing a third time, and this time he's somehow fine with it and wanders off to annoy another teenager making minimum wage. So now I'm confused as to what I was doing wrong and have a line of customers staring at me, leaving me thoroughly embarrassed. I process to overfill every container and hand them out to each customer while not taking any money from them. Then I simply walked out to my car and drove home. I never turned off or secured my register. I never formally quit. I never said a word to anyone. I just walked away. If I was doing something wrong, then fine, but there is no time where it's appropriate to scold and reprimand an employee in front of customers, and I haven't been back to that amusement park as an employee or customer since. Story 21. I worked at a sushi restaurant, and we had a secret menu with items that no one went over with me. The owner was sitting with a guest. I guess they were friends, and he ordered one of these secret menu items, and I said, "I'm sorry, we don't have that." And she immediately stands up and starts to scream at me and called me a freaking idiot, and then snapped her fingers saying witches, calling the other servers over. At this point, I was taking off my apron already and grabbing my keys to walk the heck out of there. Story 22. An upper manager at my workplace bullied a coworker until he ended it all. After that, the manager turned his attention to me. He would yell at me in front of subordinates, scream at me over the radio, and sabotage my workload and projects. I simply thought, hell no, dude, I don't care who you are or how much money I'm making, I'm not accepting that level of cruelty. I walked out and called the district manager, telling him I'd left my credentials in his office and wouldn't be back. When I had my exit interview, I was very honest and was offered a lateral promotion to a sister company, but the taste in my mouth was simply too sour. Story 23. I was already 3 hours past the time my shift was supposed to end. Along with everyone else who was on my shift, we were all very PO'd. I get that you often have to stay after when you work in food service, but everyone from the next shift was already there and there was zero reason for us to be there for 3 extra hours. Finally, someone asked to go home and the manager started screaming in the middle of the restaurant floor that just because your shift is supposed to end at 10 doesn't mean you get to leave then. I tell you, when you get to leave, you're all just numbers on a spreadsheet to us. We can replace you in a heartbeat if you don't want to be here. So I dropped all the money on the table in front of her and said, replace me then, screw you. Found out later that they lost damn near half their staff that night because most others followed my lead after. There was a huge football game the next day right across the street from the place and they got to deal with that with no servers. I went to the game and had the time of my life, lol. It was a frickin' IHOP. Story 24. It was Thanksgiving Day at Kmart. I was a teenager and I'd been working nonstop for 5 hours because of all the good deals. I had a drink under my register and I took one drink out of it. The assistant manager looked at me but didn't say anything. 10 minutes later, it was my time for my much-needed 30-minute lunch. I proceeded to ask for coverage for my break and the assistant manager told me I didn't get lunch since I took a drink of my Sprite. I then proceeded to tell her too bad and walked away and got all my stuff out of my locker and started walking out to the parking lot. Then the store managers all rushed out begging me to come back and work and apologize. They said I could take my lunch. They even had the assistant manager pathetically apologize to me. I think she got in big trouble because she never treated me like a witch anymore. If you're nodding your head in agreement and you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 25. I was getting married. I had a temp job and told them on my first day that I needed a weekend off in a couple of months for my wedding. I reminded them every couple of weeks, had it on the calendar, and even reminded them that Monday. That weekend came and I was on schedule. I told my boss that I needed it off for my wedding, and she said, "You're just a kid, can't you move it? We really need the parts." Admittedly, I was 21, marrying my 19-year-old girlfriend, but yeah. I laughed her off and left. We were scheduled Saturday and Sunday, 2 attendance points, and you're fired. So I assumed that I'd be job hunting on Monday after my wedding. I went to another temp agency on Monday and had a job lined up for Monday evening. On Tuesday, the temp job called and asked if I was coming back. I told that person, the temp agency lady, what they'd done to me. She was upset that they'd done that, tried to get me to go back, but I liked the new job and stay there. Story 26. I worked at a Dollar General for about a month. That's all I could put up with. The big thing I struggled with was how I was constantly criticized for not stocking shelves well, but I was never given specific direction as to how I was to improve at my shelf stocking. Literally, some crap like, "You're stocking shelves poorly, do better," was what I got told by the manager many times. Cracking under this pressure on the last day, I worked a full shift. I poured all of my might into what I believed to be the best shelf stocking I'd ever done for that hellhole. I cleaned the bathroom, spotless, but there was never a complaint about that anyways. I even had the key holder, assistant manager type figure check all of my work on the shelves and bathroom where I was met with praise and confirmation. To answer this question, the manager greeted me at the door the next morning for a run-through of my performance, where I was naive enough to believe that I was finally getting the pat on the back I had wanted so badly. Instead, she tried to convince me that I left a huge stain in the men's room toilet bowl and left her with my worst stocking job yet. I got mad, told her that I felt as though I was being treated unfairly. She told me that she was sorry that I couldn't take criticism. I told her that I was sorry that she had to pull applications and find a new sales associate to deal with her BS. Know your worth, people. Story 27. Not on the spot, but I was passed over for a promotion for a role I'd been doing unofficially for 6 months. There was no official position for it when I started doing it. It was one of the manager's responsibilities and they delegated it to me. Honestly, I was happy to do it and I was frequently praised for how efficient and thorough I was doing it. So when an official position opened up to do it full time, I seemed like the obvious choice. A bunch of my coworkers didn't even apply for it because they told me they didn't think there was any point since I was obviously getting the job. They gave it to a guy that worked in a different department and had no experience using the complicated system required for that job. Then the manager asked me to train him in it, except I wasn't really asked. I was told in a way that sounded like it was asking. We called it being voluntold. I refused. I said to the manager, if I'm not good enough to get the job, I'm not good enough to teach someone else how to do it. The manager then accused me of throwing a temper tantrum. I quit about a week later. Honestly, that wasn't the only reason. That was just the last straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. Even the other managers couldn't believe he said that. Yeah, and I'm almost willing to bet that the guy who got the position was either a relative or a quote unquote friend of the manager. Am I right? Right? Story 28. I was working for a placement agency at a manufacturing facility. I had already worked 7 of my 8-hour days when one of the supervisors came by to ask if anyone on my crew would stay for another 4 hours. We all looked at each other and politely declined. They came back one more time to ask, and again, we declined. Then they returned and demanded that one of us stay behind for the 4-hour shift or all of us would be written up for attendance. This infuriated everyone because we were agency workers instead of direct employees. We were unsure who to talk to. Some of the other crew members told the supervisor they couldn't stay because they had to pick up their kids, among other reasons. When the supervisor left, multiple people on the crew were saying they couldn't afford another write-up or they'd lose their jobs. I had a dinner scheduled with my in-laws, so I called my husband, explained the situation, and told him I would stay. I then informed my crew, I'll stay, don't worry. I told the supervisor, got put on another crew that only had an hour's worth of work but was still required to stay for the full 4 hours. The next day, I called the main office of the placement agency and explained the situation. They told me they had a representative on site due to this manufacturer being such a large client. I called the on-site representative and explained everything. I was told they have a lot of attendance issues. Again, I explained that I had never had attendance issues and that everyone on my crew was threatened with being written up for not staying 4 hours after their scheduled shift. The on-site representative still defended the supervisor's actions and gave me an attitude. Fine, I thought, I don't need you, I quit. And that's the story of how I learned about my workers' rights and workplace mistreatment. Story 29. Before I started working at Dollar Tree, I asked if I could have Sundays off, and they agreed, promising me that specific day. During my first week there, I asked every single day for a work schedule and reminded them of their promise about Sundays. That entire week, they refused to give me a schedule and called me at random times of the day to work. This was ridiculous because, at the time, I had college classes to attend, making it a constant battle to figure out when I could work. When Sunday arrived, I was at a carnival with my husband. He had bought tickets for that day, and it was his only day off to spend time with me. Just as we decided what to do together, my boss calls and tells me to come to work. I was baffled and reminded that she and the others had promised I could have today off, especially since I had worked all 6 days at random times without complaint. She then very meanly said she never promised such a thing and demanded I come to the store immediately. At that moment, I told her to screw herself and quit over the phone. The next day, I filed a complaint with the company about how unprofessional she and the others were with me, and I provided pictures showing how unsafe the environment was for our younger workers there. Story 30. I worked for a cleaning company and had a total disaster of a person named Tina as my manager for about 4 months. Tina would work the night shift with the crew and basically did nothing. She'd leave the majority of the work for me to do during the day, which was a lot harder since I had my own list of duties as well as whatever she left from her list. I was teetering on the edge of quitting, but I hadn't found a replacement job yet. Then one day, I got a call from head office. Tina had quit. For about a month, the job was exceptionally better, and I was effectively my own boss. Things were going remarkably smoothly for about another month when I received a text message from Tina asking me to do a bunch of extra stuff. I called the owner and they told me that Tina had approached them about coming back and they were rehiring her in her former position. I literally just packed up and walked out the door about an hour into my shift. I had zero intention of working another minute for that woman, and I stuck to it. Alright, so for a second it was almost a happy ending, and then it wasn't. Story 31. I worked at a privately owned McDonald's when I was about 17. I've worked in restaurants since I was 15, so I was kind of like the head cook as far as that can go at McDonald's, lol. I ran the grill, made all the sandwiches. This manager who spent 20 years working at the place was a complete witch to everyone in the store, but I worked day shift and she worked night, so I never had to deal with her. One day, they switched her schedule because another manager went out of town. She got on me because I didn't cleanly shave that morning, grabbed a crappy used razor they kept in the office, and made me shave dry in the dish pit. About an hour later, we're getting slammed. I'm tossing out burgers quicker, but because I was putting the onions on before the condiments, this waste of space starts flipping crap on me and telling me that everything is getting sent out wrong. I turned to her and said, "You're a witch and I'm an a-hole. We can't work together." Threw my apron on the ground and walked out in the middle of the busiest Friday afternoons we've had. Story 32. I worked as a manager in this really awesome cafe/bar. My interview was basically drinking a bottle of wine with the owner whilst chatting. Totally relaxed vibe, local artwork on the walls for which she sold no commission. indie music as background noise so you could still have a conversation, etc. One of the guys who worked there was in a band and would often go on tour, and she always made sure his job was waiting for him when he got back. Fast forward 3 years, and she became pregnant with twins and decided that she wanted to be a som, so she sold the place to a young guy who purchased it as a gift for his fiancée. A nice gift, no? But it soon became apparent that he did this because she couldn't actually hold down a job due to even the simplest of tasks being entirely beyond her. It took me 4 weeks to teach her how to use the coffee machine. She spent the evening shifts giving freebies to her mates, and she totally gave up on using the panini machine. After mastering the coffee machine, she announced that they were going to be redecorating, so we would either have to take a week off unpaid or use our holiday time. Everyone was forced to use the holiday time. Came back a week later, and we totally didn't recognize the place. It now had white walls with huge TVs blaring out dance music, and a space that only had 12 tables, so loud that we couldn't hear what anyone was saying. We checked the rotas, and I had lost 10 hours a week, but the band guy had lost 20 hours. Naturally, we asked, "What the hell?" And she informed us that she could run the place without us, so she cut our hours. We asked if they could delay the new rotas by a month to give us a chance to find extra work elsewhere. I was okay as I had a second job that begged me to be full-time, but the band guy didn't. She said that as we didn't have a contract with her, she didn't have to give us any notice. I'm not gonna lie, I was fuming, so I took my apron off, placed my keys on the counter, and said that as we didn't have a contract, I didn't have to give any notice that I quit. Then I promptly walked out and never went back again. The place closed down within 3 months. Story 33. I worked for a junk company that initially started off pretty good until it was bought out by a new owner from British Columbia. The new owner started implementing so many new policies that prevented us from making the decisions we once were able to make, and also new restrictions that would make us lose our profit share for the day at the smallest mistake. It didn't help that she also hired a schmuck ringer to be our new general manager who could not have been more out of touch with normal employees. Not even a month after this new schmuck manager arrived, he kept saying we were messing up constantly, saying we've had the worst records of the entire company, the worst driving records, etc., etc. It's like he only thrived off of telling us what we did wrong. So we were really busy one day, and instead of actually starting work, he wanted us to have another meeting where he could scold us for messing up constantly. It was also only a week after the last meeting. We're only supposed to have them once a month. The meeting was set at 7:30 a.m. for him to scold us for half an hour and then get to work on a busy day where we're forced to go as fast as we can without messing up even once. The stress of being forced to work faster while also screwing us over with all these stupid new regulations had reached its boiling point with me. So instead of going to the meeting, I called him at 6 a.m. and told him I was never coming in again. He begged me not to leave and asked if I could at least do that one day, but I said, "No, go screw yourself," and hung up the phone and blocked his and all his associates' numbers and went back to sleep. I now work for myself, and from what I heard after I quit, a ton of people quit from that place. I can't imagine it's going to stay in business much longer. Story 34. Had a job where the people were toxic, the management was mostly toxic, and the other techs made themselves look better by making other techs look bad. I had 2 guys on my shift who would go behind me during maintenance or repairs and undo stuff I did and call it out over the radio for all to hear. So I started recording myself making the repairs, and when I got called out and showed the video, I was told, "You're not supposed to have your phone out on the floor," and got written up. I walked out with no warning in the middle of the busiest weeks of the year, leaving them short-handed with only 2 idiots to handle calls. Story 35. I was a psych tech for 5 years, and the person who did the schedules hated me because I turned her in on so much BS she was not doing. One day, she took everyone off the schedule, making me work alone with 36 clients in 2 buildings. No nurse, no other tech, no staff. I called my manager, and he said, "Oops, we will try to call someone in." No one would come in, and they would not let anyone have overtime. Mostly had 36 clients all screaming at me for detox meds, smoke, and anything else. I tossed keys down and told clients I quit. "Here are keys to all the doors. Have fun." They tried to sue me, saying I willfully abandoned sick clients, but as soon as they saw they left a psych tech by themselves and told me to hand out meds, they knew they were screwed. I got a huge check to keep my mouth shut. Story 36. This was back in the day, shortly after college when I was still working as a delivery driver at a local pizza place. It was expensive pizza, and the tips were good, plus it was during the height of the Great Recession, so I was just glad to have a job. Because I had just graduated, my schedule was pretty open. I started regularly getting put on the lunch shift, which absolutely blew. All your work is crammed into 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and it's super stressful. Then it's completely quiet from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., so you're just doing dishes for minimum wage. Then the manager started trying to send me home anytime there wasn't an active delivery. I'd get halfway home, and then a delivery would call in, and I'd get called back. The end result, he'd save about 35 cents in wages while I'd spend money on gas plus wear and tear on my car. Then one day I came in and looked at the schedule. I was scheduled from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. on Thursday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Friday, and 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. on Saturday. The only shift where you'd make real money was the Saturday one. I said, screw that, and left a note on his desk resigning. Story 37. I was a senior production supervisor in a factory and desperately needed an office for the mountain of paperwork my job involved. My manager, however, decided that the boss's son needed my office more than me, deeming him more important. The son had literally just left university and was utterly clueless. His role in the company was to wander around, gather feedback from staff, and see if they could implement new, innovative ideas. No paperwork was needed for him, just a notebook to pass ideas back to daddy. My manager told me at 8 a.m. that I no longer had an office and that I should do my paperwork in the canteen. I asked, so where do you propose I put my 3 filing cabinets? In the bathroom, maybe? His response was short, if you don't like it, you know where the door is. Okay, no problem, I'll see you around then. I replied. I packed my belongings into my car and headed home. By 3 p.m., I had 15 missed calls asking for information. I simply pointed them all in the direction of the owner's son. The next morning, I got a knock on the door from the owner who wanted my contacts list so they could get things done. Nope, I told him, that's my contact list that I brought with me to the company, so it leaves with me too. He accused me of being unreasonable. I just laughed in his face and told him to get the manager to contact people he knows to resolve their problems, knowing full well that the manager had no contacts whatsoever. I enjoyed a fantastic 3 months off. A rival company contacted me and said, when you're ready to rejoin the workforce, give us a call. Now, I'm working for that rival company, earning an extra $20,000 a year and being treated like one of the family instead of like garbage by the previous company. They closed their doors in 2010 and I left my bum off at them shutting down. Story 38. I was told by the owner of the establishment I worked at that the customer does not matter. This was about an hour after we completely screwed everything up with that customer and I had personally bought them lunch while we tried to rectify the situation. The owner was unhappy with me because he said buying them lunch was me admitting weakness. For reference, this couple had taken time off work to fly in from 3 states away and come purchase from us, and the product they were receiving was in horrible condition. Figured that was a good place to end things. Our goals did not seem aligned. I was in a full commission sales position, so the customer literally pays my salary. They will always come first. Story 39. Worked for a Pizza Hut for 2 years as a driver. Only one of the original crew left. The area coach liked to change the schedule halfway through the week and then get mad when we didn't show up. The final straw was him having the new 6'1" at this point restaurant manager call me and tell me if I wasn't there by noon, I'd be fired. I freaked out and got there thanks to my mom. My wife had a car for her job at the time, and he said he was going to write me up for not being there on a scheduled date, even though I wasn't, and had a picture of the schedule to prove it. He accused me of always doing this, i.e. not checking the schedule after he'd changed it and told no one. I decided, screw it, took off my vest and hat, left them on the counter and left. It sucked, but that AC was garbage. Never looked back, got a new job, and I'm actually moving up in it. So good for me. Story 40. Logistics brokerage in 2019. It was a small company, only 20 employees in the back room of a shared workspace. My hours were from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Now this was a 35-minute commute both ways, and if I missed the 5 p.m. train, I wouldn't get home till 7. I would pack up and leave right at 4:30 and almost have to run to the train to get a seat. One day I came in and was instantly pulled into a meeting with all the managers. I was yelled at for leaving at 4:30, said my shift ends when everyone else goes home, and I just sat there waiting for my time to speak. When it was time, I told them my hours were set by them at the time of hiring with nothing said about staying till everyone is done. I had a family I wanted to get home to and all my work was done by 4 anyway. I got yelled at about work ethic and how I will look bad to my coworkers. I basically said screw it and went to my desk and sat on Reddit all morning, went to that bar at lunch and got intoxicated and came back to work. By that point, I was done. My wife agreed with me that the place sucked and I just packed up my desk and left in front of everyone at like 2:15. It felt amazing to ignore my managers calling after me and then ignoring all the calls and texts. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.